It's quite interesting because one thing that perhaps links the first conversation we had with the Plateau State governor and now with Honorable from Zamfara State is that both states are rich in mineral resources. I'm talking Plateau and Zamfara State. Plateau, tin and the rest, Zamfara, there's gold and what have you. So tonight, our next conversation is essentially tying that from the economic angle. And we're digging deep, literally speaking, into Nigeria's extractive industry. It is one that has been shrouded in a lot of opaqueness for the average Nigerian and a lot of corrupt practices which have cost the nation billions of dollars. And it's ironic that crude and other minerals that are meant to be our saving grace have now become a source of economic sabotage. Well, there's a body, thankfully, which is tasked with the responsibility to promote transparency and accountability in the management of Nigeria's oil, gas, and mining revenues. And there have been some shocking revelations made by the body. And tonight, we speak with the head of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, Dr. Ogbonnaya Orji. His Executive Secretary of NEITI joins us live from our Abuja studio. Thank you, Dr. Orji. Finally, we get to have this conversation. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Kayode. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the patience.
Indeed. So let's start with the obvious question on the minds of Nigerians, and maybe just collate all of the issues. Just how much, really, has Nigeria been fleeced, cheated out of its God-given resources over the years? If you could just give us a sense of how much we may have lost as a result of corruption and other sharp practices in that industry.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Nigerians. And let me, first of all, convey my condolences, I would say, and sympathy to the students that were involved in the kidnap issue that you just reported in Zamfara State. I imagine what the parents and the students and the victims are going through. It's not a very terrible experience. So our prayers are with the families, and I do hope our security agencies who are already on top of the situation will be able to rescue them, and we wish this happens like yesterday. Well, I would like to thank you for this invitation, and which you were quite persistent that we must come here to speak to the reports. Before I answer your questions specifically, I do hope you will give me some small time to provide a little bit of a background. The whole essence of the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which NEITI is implementing in Nigeria, and which is being implemented in 57 member countries around the world, began as a result of global attention and global search for a permanent solution to resource costs. Resource costs is a situation where countries like ours, blessed with human material resources, rich in oil, gas, and mining, and earns a lot of revenue in these natural resources, find its majority of its citizens in poverty and squalor, ignorance, and disease. And this is not peculiar to Nigeria. This is equally like a study done by the World Bank, spreads across most countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. And in these countries, you find exactly the kind of situation that we just reported, unfortunately, in a state like Zamfara, where you have insurgency, you have kidnapping, which is all over the country. Poverty breeds a lot of insecurity. And this insecurity is as a result of lack. It's a result of joblessness, despondency, frustration, and as a result of illiteracy. When people have access to good roads, have access to electricity, have access to water, have access to food, have access to employment and quality life, the security situation is most likely to be very, very well managed, as you see in developed countries. So in 2003 precisely, under the leadership of the then Prime Minister of United Kingdom, the World Conference was held in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and to discuss a finding by the World Bank The countries that are blessed with natural resources always find its citizens in abject poverty. And in those countries, you have resource costs, resource wars, conflicts, you have unemployment, you have social insecurity, you have refugee issues, and several of the kind of challenges we're currently battling with in Nigeria. Examples were given of Liberia, where you had civil wars all about resources. And then Sierra Leone, you have Niger, you have in Chad, you have in Sudan, you have all over most of these countries found in the sub-Saharan Africa. And across Africa, across other parts of the world, the kind of situation you also find in most countries in Southeast Asia, in Asia, and most of the countries also in Europe. So the countries that have managed their resources well and those that have not managed their countries well had to come together under the Global Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. That was the outcome of that World Conference in Johannesburg held in 2003. So Nigeria was among the earliest countries to join this initiative. In 2004, began implementation immediately, and in 2007, supported implementation with a specific law. Now, what do we do? What's exactly unique about the EITI process, and how does it operate to answer the kind of question that you're answering? We depend our operations on public disclosure, believing that when information and data are placed squarely on the public domain, the citizens will have basis of data and information to ask informed questions and hold both companies that receive and manage the resources in terms of revenue from oil, gas, and mining, and the companies that pay this, remit this into account, hold them to account to ask informed questions. And when informed questions are asked, in answer to those questions, reforms happen, and reforms brings about impact. It's a very long story, but I've just tried to cut it short. So our implementation has been very comprehensive.
Right.
Because we became the first country all over the world to back initiative with a law. And our law requires us to comply to international obligations and also to our local requirements. And in our local requirement, we are doing far more than the normal extractive industrial transparency initiative standards. Here, we are required to ask question, how much money did companies pay to government? How much of that money did government actually receive? Did the companies pay what they should pay? Did government receive what it should receive? That's the basis of our intervention. And when
that's
this
quite
report
interesting.
is out, we place them in the public domain.
Right.
And for the media, the civil society, the legislature, ordinary Nigerians, the government, the companies, everyone, to use that report to ask informed questions. So when I got your invitation and persistence to be here, is also in line with the fact that when the report is produced, there should be adequate engagement, outreach, explanation of public enlightenment on how these reforms can inform public debate.
So let's go into the
kind of reforms.
So let's go into some of the outcome, or at least the major findings of that report. And it's ironic for me that even government-owned corporations that participate in this process, it would seem. We've seen that companies have not remitted over $7 billion, NNPC $6.9 billion, 47 companies together, over 1 billion. And you sort of wonder, how did we get to that point? Is it a philosophy in governance or public institutions that, well, it is nobody's money anyway, we're not accountable to anyone, so we don't have to render our accounts or open our books? Or is it the lack of structure? What exactly did you find to be the major factor that fuels opaqueness and corruption in that sector, Dr. Orji?
Well, the first is process issues. There are issues of process failure. We have issues of financial regime abuses. We had issues of production, poor management of production in the sector, management of both foreign and domestic exports. We had the issues of revenue generation and poor proper management of these revenues. But if I must speak to the recent report that we just released, in that report we had we had a total of 69 companies and 12 government agencies. The 12 government agencies are the agencies that either receive, take custody, or manage extractive industry revenue funds, while the 69 companies are the companies that do business in the sector. And in this particular engagement that we had, we were only concerned with companies that do pay royalty in excess of $5 million. And in all this, we were able to find out total revenue generation for the sector for the 2021 report in excess of $23 billion. We also established how many companies were involved, 69 of them, and we also identified the key revenue streams from where all these monies came in. We equally have figures on what was stolen in forms of oil theft, pipeline vandalization, sabotage, and outright stealing of crude. We equally have information on beneficial ownership disclosures, who were actually the beneficial owners of these oil assets. How many licenses were awarded during the period? What quantity do we produce? How many were reserved for local consumption? How many were exported? In terms of subsidy, how much was paid and how much was paid out as subsidy month by month and year by year? And again, we equally looked at the cash call involvements, how much was paid by government as cash call, are there liabilities? We equally looked at the amount of money that companies paid that were not remitted, how much of that is outstanding as liabilities, both on the part of government and on the part of companies. 47 companies were identified, and our own national oil company, the NNPC, has a lot of that liability, arising from either failure to remit royalties paid, sales of equity crude, some kind of deductions they made outside appropriation, and a number of. So it's a very loaded report that has a lot of information. And what we have done was also to make very far-reaching recommendations.
Indeed.
And we have also simplified this report that if you don't have all the time to read this report as it is, I have a full copy here. If you can't have the time to read the entire report, it's also available on our website with all the necessary supporting documents and appendices. This is exactly what the law requires us to do, to publish this report, send them straight to Mr. President, which we have done, send them to the office of the LGF, which we have done, and present them to the National Assembly and the Auditor General of the Federation, as well as relevant government agencies that need this information to make an informed decision. And because the international development partners we work with, who are the Global Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative based in Oslo, Norway, they equally, it's a standard and a requirement that we publish this report on our website. We've already done so. And investors require this report to make informed investment decisions. And all the global assessments that Nigeria are usually subjected to, either by the World Bank and all the other global institutions, investment institutions, they look at issues like NEITI reports to make investment decisions and assessments. So that's why this report is very important.
Okay, and Dr. Orji.
Far more important are the recommendations that we have made.
You can land on one of the major recommendations. Can you speak to the major recommendations? There's still a point I need to make as we wind down, but just quickly, the major recommendation for that.
Yeah, one of the major recommendations is for the monies that are being owed as liabilities to be recovered. Nigeria is looking for money. The government is looking for money every day. And we do not think for us to go and borrow would be wise when we have some windows to recover for monies that are outstanding. If those identified that are owing have paid, they should show proof. That's one area. The other area are in the areas of regulation.
Right.
Implementation of the PIA in its letters and form. Because that PIA, NEITI was in the forefront. It was our recommendation. And if you implement the PIA, most of these issues, the reforms that are ongoing now should be fast-tracked.
All right.
There are
Dr. Orji,
also recommendations we've made.
Just as we wind down because of time, and I think it's important to make this clear that a lot of Nigerians should actually get on board, study these reports, and hold government accountable because it's a joint work. But you had also revealed earlier that crude oil valued at over 16 trillion naira has been stolen in the country since 2009, and that the culprits include high-profile members of society, security agencies, and host communities that had been reported. And a lot of Nigerians saw that, and they were shocked, particularly the fact that those responsible most times are not brought to account. They don't face the law. Is there a recommendation for that? Is there information available for government to be able to pursue those people and ensure that they don't just remit those monies that Nigeria has lost, but at least they answer for that crime?
Well, we have a new government currently, and the interest they have shown so far to us is very encouraging. We are working very currently now, reviewing the recommendations with the office of the SGF, and we are very encouraged with the support we are getting. We're equally very highly encouraged by the support we are getting from the National Assembly and from leading civil society organizations, development partners, and in fact the media. So we do know that our job is to provide this information in the public domain, and the job of all the government, the civil society, and the industry are to look at this report and see how the recommendations we've made can be implemented. And that is very, very key in the whole of this process.
Indeed. There's so much to discuss, but I do hope we can take this up another time. But we have to wrap up right now. And just to give context to Nigerians, Nigeria is just doing above 1.1 million barrels a day, as opposed to the 1.74. Oil is at 94, or $95. So imagine if we're performing optimally, no one is stealing our crude. We'll be earning a lot of revenue, but perhaps that's an appetizer for the next conversation we'll have. I'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Benaya Orji, the Executive Secretary of NEITI. It's been good having you on the program tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Good night.